Good afternoon, guys.
Good morning.
Hello. Hello.
Well, actually,
Yeah,
good morning.
How are you? Can you all hear me well?
Yeah.
Hi, this is Andy Finley.
Hi, how are you? So, first of all, I want to thank you all for being here today. We know how much of a priority automating anti-money laundering has become for casinos, and SAS and QLX just want to help you by providing you all with as much support as we can. So that's why we're going to dedicate the next 45 minutes today of this webinar to talk about how you can protect your casino's assets by using advanced analytics to uncover illicit activity and comply, of course, with AML and CTF regulations. Today we have Jason Grasson from SAS. He will be covering the biggest challenges that casinos are facing nowadays, as well as giving us details about the SAS solutions available to prevent AML. Jason is very knowledgeable on AML. He has several years of expertise in the field, and he recently wrote a very interesting article on the Gaming and Leisure magazine. I'm going to share the link with you shortly. I will just put it here on the chat, and then so he will be the one taking over the presentation. So without much more to say, I just pass it on to him now.
Thank you, Joanna, for that introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, depending where you may be this fine day. Today what we'll cover off is on the content, and then also leave about 10 minutes for question, answers, and just comments here. So first, just an introduction about myself. I'm a financial crimes solution specialist here at SAS, focusing both in pre-sales and then also post-implementation of SAS's financial crime solutions. As you can see, extensive experience in the AML industry, more focused on the banking side, whereas a BSA AML officer at a top 25 bank. And also focusing in on, governance and oversight, mergers, acquisitions, and the such. So, I've had extensive experience in dealing with regulators and, their expectations. I kind of, without here is, we had a picture taken of what I would have looked like if I spent about 5 more years dealing with regulators. All joking aside, we do understand how challenging it could be in this regulatory environment. It never seems, with all the good work you all are doing, it never seems to be enough. So throughout this webinar today, we're going to share some best practices that we've seen from, casinos and other gaming establishments, and also where we think the regulatory industry is going. So just a little bit about SAS and the financial crime space. You can see robust customer growth year over year. We have a very diverse customer base. It's non-traditional, what I would call financial institutions. So that would be, we are in the casino space. We're with money remitters, large retailers, financial banks, across the world. We're in 35 different countries with over 150 clients. You all are on this webinar today. You're probably very familiar with, the regulatory environment, the fines, the pressures, whether it be the IRS or the regulators continuing questioning about what's going on. One of the things here, we do want to call out here is we have been talking to numerous casinos, and one of the perhaps unintended consequences of the regulatory pressures that banks are facing is that they're becoming, for lack of a better word, de facto regulators to their clients. And we've talked to clients that have said that their banks now are asking them various questions about their AML program and, really prove it and going on site. And, this is obviously, of concern to, the casinos and the gaming operations because obviously without, operational accounts or, if accounts were to be demarketed or closed, that would be a large issue. And also too, from a lending perspective on, future capital for growth. If that is stunted, that has a great effect on future operations. Also, it's our industry view that FinCEN is really focusing in on casinos, mainly because of, the OCC on the banking side and the Department of New York are really focusing in on the banks there, and for lack of a better word, of kind of beat FinCEN to the punch, with that. So in this sort of election year and everybody trying to show value, I think that's why in my opinion you're seeing FinCEN put a lot of pressure on money remitters and casinos, because they're trying to carve out a space for themselves there. And again, it becomes unfortunately a competition between agencies, and then you all are caught in those crosshairs. So listing 6 main challenges that we've seen in talking to casinos of all shapes, sizes, tribal, non-tribal. We probably could have listed 100, right? But these are some 6 that we wanted to focus in and kind of talk through. So the first one, sort of what I would call old school and new school. I think there definitely is a presence where you want to know about your clients and understand the source of funds, and then you can get some resistance, whether it be from the business side or the marketing side, but perhaps about we don't want to know too much about this client because they're really good for revenue producing and things like that. So there's always that sort of push and pull between compliance and the business. Obviously, in the compliance space, you all understand that you're there for brand protection and whatnot, and compliance does start at the top, and having that culture there to cultivate that. Next point here is competing with banks over detection, right? So what I would say here is obviously on a business-to-business, casinos are competing against each other, right, for profitable players and market share and all that. But in the compliance space, I think I know there's a lot of discussions and roundtables with the casino folks in compliance about best practices and whatnot. And I think that's a very good thing, because from a compliance perspective, you all really are not competing with each other, right? And actually, if you align with best practices, you're making sure that a bar is set so that everybody understands, sort of the boundaries. I would say, though, there is some competition with the banks. And what do I mean by that? Well, so say, for example, these banks have, had detection systems and automation now for, since about 2001, 2002, and they've become pretty efficient and effective at detecting suspicious activity. So where does the competition come into play? Well, the competition comes into play if, one of your casinos are, you're cashing, you're sending cashier's checks, right, for, potential winnings and the such, and, the bank that they deposited in finds that, potentially suspicious, they'll file a suspicious activity report with the government, and let's just say that that individual is involved in, nefarious activities, right, and that kicks off a criminal investigation. What's going to happen is whatever jurisdiction is, investigating that, whether it be FBI, DEA, ICE, right, they're going to see the SAR file by the bank, and the next question they're going to say is, okay, X casino, where was your SAR filed, and what does that look like? And then, if you don't have that SAR, that opens it up for, some potential issues, and then they start digging for problems. And, to be honest, whether it be a casino, a bank, a money remitter, anyone who's looking for problems can find them, because, you can never cast the net at 100%. Manual detection versus decentralized documentation. Talking to the casinos, as we have for the last year or so, there's a lot of very knowledgeable folks on the investigative side who know, the casino risks and business extremely well. More than, to be honest, we would here. There's no way we could bring that expertise of, casino operations for folks that have worked there for 10, 20 years. What we're seeing is, we have the expertise in, automating and making AML systems more efficient. And what we're seeing here with the manual detection is that the casino investigators are very good at determining, what's suspicious, what's not suspicious. However, there's a lot of, manual information that needs to be gathered, and that, takes away from time spent on identifying more suspicious activity. Also, decentralized documentation. So, as you guys, I'm sure, have experienced, regulators will come in and say, well, what's going on here? What did you do with this case? We saw that this person did X. Date, timestamp, robustness, right? And right now we're seeing it's a lot of spreadsheets and whatnot. And with regulators, if you can't show it and prove it, they'll interpret it as it didn't happen, and that's not necessarily the case. Incomplete patron view. We've seen here a lot of casinos have what I would call disparate systems, right? So it's hard to see full patron exposure across one property, or even more compounded across multiple properties, right? Is a patron playing at one property, then playing at another. Also, what's their cage look like, versus slots and all that, right? And then also you have, the compliance in the business. So, business and marketing are obviously compensated on bringing the right players in, but, what if compliance has a player that they don't want to, basically service anymore, right? You want to put them on some sort of list that, they're barred, or you're thinking about barring them. However, you have your marketing group who's trying to actually gather more of their assets to be played at your property, right? So that's really, you want to kind of have a consistent message across all of the property, and that really is done through, robust reporting and, abilities to communicate with senior management and have that governance and infrastructure to facilitate that. Another main challenge we've heard from a lot of casinos is that, the regulators may not fully understand your business, right? It's clear, you all are not a bank, right? Banks are very, straightforward in some respect. You put your mortgage in, or excuse me, you get your payroll, you put that in, you pay your bills and mortgage, right? It's most customers are pretty regular. Whereas, in talking to the casinos, we know that, yeah, you have some clients that come every Friday night, right? But then you'll have other clients that may just come quarterly or bi-yearly, or even, there's just some luck, if you will, that goes into it. So there's things that could look suspicious, but really, that player had a couple bad hands, didn't like the dealer, walked away, things like that. And that's where, again, but the regulators may not understand your business. They're thinking that there's an issue where, there may not be an issue. Now that's where, the documentation comes in, is that having that documentation ready and handy will kind of cut the regulators off at that pass. And then lastly, it should come as no surprise, but the regulatory enforcement is at unseen levels. For folks that have been in the space far longer than I have, you can see that the fines are increasing, the regulatory pressure, and I think it's also important to note that it's not just the fines that go into the cost of what I would call improper compliance. There's legal fees that go into dealing with negotiating these settlements. There are also potential lookbacks that will be required, that require usually consulting firms to do, right? Because you barely have enough staff to cover off on your current risks. If you're doing a look back of activity for 2+ years in the rears, you just are not staffed for that. So you're going to have to do that outside, and that's going to be an added expense. So in coming from these regulatory enforcement actions, what gets reported really is the fine itself. But in talking to institutions who have been under fines in all industries, the consulting and the legal fees are quite comparable to the fine itself. So, anybody can kind of point out the challenges and the issues, right? But really, I think why you all joined today is, some best practices and, how can we make your job, a little easier, right? So, where we are on this journey and how we help, right? First is, the need to understand. So again, thinking that the compliance folks in the casinos are very good at identifying, potential suspicious activity, but it's very manual. You're going out to these disparate systems, you're running these queries. It's very, person dependent. Where, really what we're saying is the first stage is to understand, your complete risk, right? So that's a single view across functions and channels, right? So whether you're a one property casino or gaming or multiple, right? Having that one property view. Also, dynamic reporting and emerging risks. So, I would suspect that, senior management is very aware of potential AML risks, right? And the cost of improper compliance. So, you're probably going to be challenged by, if you haven't been already, right, by your senior management to, prove, what sort of shape your AML shop is in. And how do you do that? I mean, with static reports, that you just don't get that, right? So we have solutions in place where, you can literally take key performance indicators, key risk indicators, and drill down on the information in real time so that, as questions arise, you can answer them on the fly. Simplified user experience, right? So, like I said, a lot of investigators right now are kind of going out and querying databases, right? And then looking at a player and then checking all the other databases to see, what sort of other exposure or play is there, right? Very manual process. That takes away that time spent looking at what you've already identified isn't efficient, right? You want to automate that and bring the information to the investigators so that they can investigate more suspicious activity. Next is to operationalize, right? So, you have these processes in place where, you're looking for suspicious activity. Again, you're documenting your findings. That's one of the most important things is that, as the regulators and internal audit are going to come in and say, okay, what happened here? Who did what? Who you sent this case to this individual, or it was waiting this documentation, prove it, right? And without that robust documentation, it puts you at, an issue about proving what you've done. As far as transparency, right? So, everything's, documented in the system to say that, these are the risk scenarios and queries I run. These are the thresholds. This is what triggered, this what didn't trigger, right? So, again, you're showing control over your compliance program. Now, as you want to continue to stay in control of your compliance program, whereas once you start getting into these regulatory issues, you lose control of your regulatory program and it ultimately becomes more expensive. So once you've understood the risks across your property or properties, you've operationalized and made more effective and efficient streamlining of the investigative process, the next step is really to enhance, right? So, and how do you do that? Visual networking, right? So, there are connections out there within your portfolio that you may not be aware of, right? Who's connected to who? Who, maybe you have a banned player and they now have ordered a hotel, 6 hotel rooms with their credit card for 6 other players, right? That's probably something that you want to look at. You may want to monitor those 6 players while they're on your property, right? But without analytics, you don't know that that banned player, he still or she still may be able to purchase the hotel room, but now you want to follow those 6 players because now, they'll be playing on your floor and adding additional risks, right? That's where analytics can help the investigative process. Client risk scoring, right? Obviously with your higher risk clients and patrons, you want to put more monitoring on top of them, right? For the patron that comes in and spends a couple $100, that's not a risk to you all. You want to take your, investigative resources and put them towards your higher risk clients. Segmentation and peer grouping, right? You guys do segmentation for marketing, but now from an AML perspective, you can put customers in the appropriate segments so that, you're monitoring your higher end players, in the same peer group, but then your lower players you're monitoring a different way, right? You wouldn't monitor your high players to your low players, right? So It's again being more efficient and effective to reduce the false positives that your investigators are working on so that they can spend and maximize their time during the investigative process. So we have a modular approach to solving this issue here with casinos. Here's a quote you can see here by the FinCEN director, right? Talking about AML compliance was purely a cost center. But now the expectation is they're sharing information across the organization. Now how do you do that, right? You do that through reporting, technology, case management, right? That's where it all fits in. So the first step is having the analytics and the data layer like we talked about, right? You want to centralize your investigations. You want to bring all that information together so that you make it more efficient and effective. And you're having your investigators, instead of going out and getting the data and information is coming to them. Now also too, one thing that separates SAS from other vendors is we're talking about financial crime offerings today, but SAS is at its heart an analytic company. So you can see we have data integration and data quality tools embedded into the solution, right, to bring the data out of the databases that you currently have and into the analytics and data layer for enhanced discovery. Then you have your activity modeling, right, like we talked about, single patron view, running those scenarios, right, whether it be for chip walking or high-risk wires or cash structuring, and bringing those findings back to your investigators. Case management we talked about, right, showing your governance and audit of cases, filing SARs automatically with FinCEN, minimizing the typing and manual entry, right, that goes on. Also customer due diligence, continuous risk rating of your clients. As their attributes change, that scoring risk could change. Again, it's showing that complete control of the portfolio, that you can drill down into the information and show that you have control over your patrons. Then we also have emerging risk discovery and dynamic reporting. We talked about dynamic reporting is that if you're being challenged, as you should be, right, by your senior management at what your AML risk is, they're going to ask a lot of questions. And the last thing you want to do is say, oh, I got to get back to you, right? Because you want to have the information at your fingertips. We have solutions available, like I mentioned, HTML5 enabled, where you can have dynamic reporting on a laptop, on a tablet, even on a phone, where you could be providing these key risk indicators to management, and you have that information where you can drill down. So if they say, for example, why are cash payouts in property 3 different from property 2 in the last 2 months, you can drill down and see which patrons contributed to that. Also, emerging risk discovery. So if you really think about it, the scenarios and the queries that you're running today, those are the risks that you know. But as a risk manager, what really we would all be worried about is the risks we don't know. So we have clients that are using our in-memory technology to basically surf their portfolio data and looking for anomalous trends, right, to determine if it's a one-off or if it's something that, if it's a big enough of a trend, they'll put back into the monitoring system, to be run at an operational level, right? Talking about, the queries and the scenarios that you run. We have, concept of templates. So this allows us to go cross-industry, right? Like I talked about, we are working with casinos. We're working with money remitters. We're working with retailers. We're working with banks. And these scenario templates as a strategy helps us really, focus in on the risks that are specific to you. So for example, structuring, right? If somebody's trying to avoid, the requirements, that can be detected. If, your casino will take international wires, we can monitor those, right? To see, if certain countries are higher risk, they would, require further investigation. aggregate unusual behavior, right? So, say for example, a player was playing at a $5,000 level, month over month, and all of a sudden they start spiking to a $50,000 level, right? That's something that you probably want to alert on and investigate. It could very well be nothing. It could be that, for example, they've decided to invest more, of their funds, into gambling or whatever. But again, it's you have that ability to look at deviations and be more analytically driven, so that when regulators or somebody else are questioning you, you have the answers right there. This is what we talked about here is, having the answers at your fingertips. So in this here this is something that you would want to report on for proper governance, right, to your senior management, perhaps on a monthly, quarterly basis. So there's going to be key performance indicators and key risk indicators that you're tracking. And then from there, you can provide these reports to management, but as we mentioned, have that dynamic ability to drill down on the information and, again, answer questions on the fly. So the answers are literally at your fingertips, rather than having, Excel spreadsheets or whatever and saying, well, I need to go back to you, right? If they're asking you a question and you don't have the data in front of you, how long are those queries taking? Are they taking hours to run, right? In compiling all that data, where with our in-memory technology, we're layering, our technology on top of your data. We're lifting it in memory, so literally the answers are at your fingertips. Now, kind of looking at the user interface, what does this look like? So, as you can see here, SAS as a company is moving more towards visualization. It's easier for us humans, right, to see a picture, understand it, rather than reading a lot of text, right? So what you can see here is, you have a customer address where you can drill down into, the map. You can actually get down to the street level, right? So, part of your, KYC process, if, let's say, for example, you have an individual who, claims that they're a waiter or something and are relatively young, yet, they're deeded to a house that's, multi-million dollars, that's going to probably cause some sort of more enhanced due diligence, right, about, maybe they come from a wealthy family, right? Or what if they can't explain the source of funds? Things aren't adding up. You also see down here, you have information on a graphical level, right? So you can tell where an investigator is looking. So in this example here, you see the spike right here, so that's already telling the investigator that that's what I want to focus on. And here you have debits and credits, and again, this is configurable to, conform to your investigative processes. But the premise here is that the information is being brought to the investigators rather than the investigators going out to disparate databases to get that information. And it's incredible when we see clients move from a more manual to an automated environment, just how much more effective the risk management process is. Here's another example here of, just what this customer is alerting on, and then having all the information in here, and then they would click on the information to get further detail. So really, the concept and purpose of this is to keep the investigators in the application, right? So they're not going to multiple databases, looking for disparate data and burning time, right? Where we want to make them as efficient as possible so they can actually ferret out and report on the most suspicious activity. Another example too, we talked about, so that was sort of the operational aspect of it, right? You want to operationalize what you're doing, become more efficient. But over time, once you've optimized it, right, you want to now enhance it. So we also have, analytics that really kind of go in and dig in your customer profiles and your patron profiles and look for rings that don't look to be, at the surface, wouldn't look to be related, right? So, it's as simple as, they share common addresses, but then it could be, as complex as, they're dealing with, counterparties, or they have a same mailing address, or they've used, other sort of means, a common credit card, or even a common company, right, to bring things together. Now, there's also advanced analytics that will go even further into, looking at, what we would call, patron signatures. And this is where, we take factors that the patrons have, and again, it may not be apparent, to a potential investigator, but looking and linking at, who could be related. It could be, time of play or time of redemption, right? Not just one time, but if it's multiple times of redemption, right? And, it's similar patrons, there could be perhaps a kind of smurfing event going on where it looks like they're trying to evade, reporting. Again, this is part of the enhancement process of moving the intelligence and continuing to progress the AML program to meet, the current, not only the current regulatory needs, but the future regulatory requirements. Okay, with that, we'll turn it over to any questions, comments that we have. Be more than happy to answer them. I think we have about 5-10 minutes allotted for that, and then we'll also have a wrap-up. So, please ask away.
Hi, this is Gwen. My question would be, what platform is this service written on?
Right. So, yeah, the platform is, it's a SAS system, but it also runs on databases such as, Oracle, DB2, among others.
So is this a hosted solution or a self-contained solution?
Yeah, we can offer it 3 different ways. One would be your typical on-premises, where, it's your hardware and whatnot. Kind of a more standard approach. We also have a remote managed service where we remotely would manage, the service and the servers, and then from there, there's a third step we also offer as a full cloud solution where, it's basically turnkey, and, you have, individuals just using the user interface.
Okay.
You guys have a stripped down version, because you guys are focusing on a level of granularity that the auditors are just not focused on. I mean, I was in IRS for 26 years. I mean, really, it's hard to justify a lot of what you guys are doing right now, but, you guys might want to consider a stripped down version where it's just a case management.
Yeah, right. So what we've been doing is, like you said, meeting with clients to determine what their needs are, and instead of saying, this is the stack you need to take, really sitting down with clients to understand their needs and right fitting, what they need for, today. So, we wouldn't expect, let's just say, for example, a casino that's just kind of starting the journey to take the stack that, one of the large global banks is taking, right, for example. So really what we're saying is, these are our offerings, and really we can sit down and tailor fit, something to your needs, because we understand that each casino is going to be different, because, some are more, don't have a lot of international clientele, some have more international clientele. So we really sit down, understand the business, and then really right fit the solution to the risks and the needs of the firm. Any other questions or comments, or were there other risks that other challenges that, we think are maybe a little more pressing than the ones we listed?
So on your due diligence, are you, what are you sourcing in your due diligence?
Right. So what we would be doing is we'd be taking the attributes from your patrons, right? So demographical information, level of play, and then also, findings, whether you filed a SAR or some other, transactional level details, and then, scoring them so that, your higher risk clients are being alerted on, and then that would allow the investigators then to do their enhanced due diligence, whether it be, the Google searches, source of funds, LexisNexis, and so on. But it provides, the patron profile to be established and documented along with the investigative findings. So say, for example, during the due diligence process, a investigator finds that this individual is from a wealthy family and whatnot, they can attach documents that from the media to support that. It's all date and time stamped. So when the regulators come and say, wow, this really looks suspicious, you all can show your documentation that, well, actually, yes, at its surface it looks suspicious. However, due to our due diligence findings, this is what we concluded, and this is what, actually it's why it's not suspicious.
So you didn't automate the enhanced due diligence process, meaning you're not pulling in from Google, LexisNexis or Clear, Pacer, any of that. That's the other step. So you're just risk rating from a due diligence standpoint based on level of play, and then to get a full picture of the client's transactions, and then you still need to go do the enhanced due diligence using other databases.
Yeah, correct. There are databases, though, that we interface with. So say, for example, you use WorldCheck or Factiva or some others to do your due diligence. We have a pipe that's built so that we just take the list that you have provisioned and then run it against your customer base so that it's automated, so that you say, okay, this is a potential WorldCheck or Dow Jones hit, and then from there, like you said, you can do leverage your information to determine if that's a true hit or not. Okay, if there's no other questions or comments, Joanna, I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Jason, for such an informative presentation. This has definitely been a very, very productive hour, and I really hope that everybody has now a clearer understanding of the different ways that QLX and SAS can help you to mitigate money laundering. We're very sorry that Jimena couldn't be with us today, but as soon as she's back to the office, she had a personal matter to attend. I'm sure she will be sending you more information, more details regarding the different initiatives that SAS and QLX have nowadays regarding AML. And if you still have questions or you want to go further on this topic, then just please contact Jimena, and I'm sure she will be more than happy to answer all your questions. And also, if you want to share this presentation